73. Stubb and Flask kill a right whale and then have a talk over him. It must be borne in mind that all this time we have a sperm whale's prodigious head hanging to the Pequod's side. But we must let it continue hanging there a while till we can get a chance to attend to it. For the present other matters press, and the best we can do now for the head is to pray the heavens the tackles may hold. Now, during the past night and forenoon, the Pequod had gradually drifted into a sea, which, by the occasional patches of yellow brick, gave unusual tokens of the vicinity of right whales, a species of leviathan that but few supposed to be at this particular time lurking anywhere near. And though all hands commonly disdain the capture of those inferior creatures, and though the Pequod was not commissioned to cruise for them at all, and though she passed numbers of them near the Croisets without lowering a boat, yet now that a sperm whale had been brought alongside and beheaded, and to the surprise of all, the announcement was made that a right whale should be captured that day if the opportunity offered. Now this was a long wanting. Tall spouts were seen to the leeward, and two boats, Stubbs and Flask, were detached in pursuit. Pulling further and further away, they at last became almost invisible to the men at the masthead. But suddenly in the distance they saw a great heap of tumultuous white water, and soon after news came from aloft that one or both of the boats must be fast. An interval passed and the boats were in plain sight, in the act of being dragged right towards the ship by the towing whale. So close did the monster come to the hull that at first it seemed as if he meant it malice. But suddenly going down in a maelstrom within 3 rods of the planks, he wholly disappeared from view, as if diving under the keel. "Cut! Cut!" was a cry from the ship to the boats, which at one instant seemed on the point of being brought with a deadly dash against the vessel's side. But having plenty of line yet in the tubs, and the whale not sounding very rapidly, they paid out an abundance of rope and at the same time pulled up with all of their might, so as to get ahead of the ship. For a few minutes the struggle was intensely critical, for while they still slacked out the tightened line in one direction and still plied their oars in the other, the contending strain threatened to take them under. But it was only a few feet advance they sought to gain, and they stuck to it till they did it again, when instantly a swift tremor was felt running like lightning along the keel, as the strained line, scraping beneath the ship, suddenly rose to view under her bows, snapping and quivering, and so flinging off its droppings, that the drops fell like bits of broken glass on the water, while the whale beyond rose to sight, and once more the boats were free to fly. But the fagged whale abated his speed and blindly altered his course, went round the stern of the ship, towing the 2 boats after him, so that after they performed a complete circuit. Meantime they hauled more and more upon the lines, till close to flanking him on both sides, Stubb answered Flask with lance for lance, and thus round and round the Pequod the battle went, while the multitudes of sharks that before swum round the sperm whale body rushed to the fresh blood that was spilled, thirstily drinking at every new gash, as the eager Israelites did at the new bursting fountains that poured from the smitten rock. At last his spout grew thick, and with a frightful roll and vomit he turned upon his back a corpse. While the 2 headsmen were engaged in making fast cords to his flukes, and in other ways getting the mass in readiness for towing, some conversation ensued between them. "I wonder what the old man wants with this lump of foul lard," said Stubb, not without some disgust at the thought of having to do so ignoble a leviathan. "Wants with it," said Flask, coiling some spare line in the boat's bow. "Did you ever hear that a ship but once had as a sperm whale head hoisted on her starboard side at the same time a right whale's head on her larboard side? Did you ever hear, Stubb, that ship can never afterwards capsize?" "Why not?" "I don't know, but I heard that Gambuji ghost of Fedallah say so, and he seems to know all about ship's charms. But I sometimes think he'll charm a ship to no good at last. I don't half like that chap, Stubb. Did you ever notice how that tusk of his is sort of curved into a snake's head, Stubb?" "Sink 'em, I never look at him at all. But if I ever get a chance of a dark night he's standing hard by the bulwarks and no one by, Look down there, Flask, pointing into the sea with a peculiar motion of both hands. I will fly. Flask, I take that Fedallah to be the devil in disguise. Do you believe that cock and bull story about his having been stowed away on board ship? He's the devil, I say, and the reason why you don't see his tail is because he tucks it up out of sight. He carries it coiled away in his pocket, I guess. Blast him, that's how I think of it. He's always wanting oakum to stuff in the toes of his boots. He sleeps in his boots, don't he? He hasn't got a hammock, but I've seen him lay nights on a coil of rigging. No doubt it's because of his cursed tail. He coils it down, do you see, into the eye of the rigging. What's the old man have so much to do with him for? Striking up a swap or a bargain, I suppose. Bargain about what? Why, do you see, the old man is hard bent after that white whale, and the devil there is trying to come round him, and to get him to swap away his silver watch or his soul or something of that sort, and then he'll sunder Moby Dick. Pooh, Stubb, you're skylarking. How can Fedallah do that? I don't know, Flask, but the devil is a curious chap and a wicked one, I tell ye. Why, they say as how he went sauntering into the old flagship once, switching his tail about devilish easily and gentlemanlike, and inquiring if the old governor was at home. Well, he was at home, and asked the devil what he wanted. The devil, switching up his hoofs up, and says, I want John. What for, says the old governor. What business of that is yours, said the devil, getting mad. I want use of him. Take him, says the governor. And by the Lord, Flask, if the devil didn't give John the Asiatic cholera before he got through with him, I'll eat this whale in one mouthful. But look sharp, ain't you already there? Well then, pull ahead and let's get the whale alongside. I don't remember some such story as you were telling, said Flask, when the last two boats were slowly advancing with their burden toward the ship, but I can't remember where. 3 Spaniards? Adventures of those 3 bloody-minded salados? Did you read it there, Flask? I guess you did. No, never saw such a book. Heard of it, though. Now tell me, Stubb, do you suppose that devil you was speaking of just now was the same you say is now on board the Pequod? Am I the same man that helped kill this whale? Doesn't the devil live forever? Who ever heard that the devil was dead? Did you ever see a parson mourning for the devil? And if the devil has a latchkey to get him into the admiral's cabin, don't you suppose he can crawl into a porthole? Tell me that, Mr. Flask. How old do you suppose Fedallah is, Stubb? Do you see that mainmast there, pointing up to the ship? Well, that's the figure 1. Now take all the hoops in the Pequod's hole and string 'em along in a row with that mast for aughts. Do you see? Well, that wouldn't begin to be Fedallah's age, nor could the coopers in creation show hoops enough to make aughts enough. But see here, Stubb, I thought you a little boasted just now, but you mean to give Fedallah a sea toss if you get a good chance? Now, if he's so old that all those hoops of yours come to, and if he's going to live forever, what good will it do to pitch him overboard? Tell me that. Give him a good dunking anyhow. But he'll crawl back, duck him again, and keep ducking him. Suppose he should take it into his head to duck you, though. Yes, and to drown you. What then? I should like to see him try it. I'll give him such a pair of black eyes that he wouldn't dare show his face in the admiral's cabin for a long while, let alone down in the oar-loop there where he lives, and hereabouts on the upper deck where he sneaks so much. Damn the devil, Flask. So you suppose I'm afraid of the devil? Who's afraid of him except the old governor who dares catch him and put him in double darbies as he deserves? But lets him go about kidnapping people, aye, and signed a bond with him that all the people the devil kidnapped he'd roast for him. There's a governor. Do you suppose Fedallah wants to kidnap Captain Ahab? Do I suppose it? You'll know it before long, Flask, but I'm going to keep a sharp lookout on him, and if I see anything very suspicious going on, I'll just take him by the nape of the neck and say, Look here, Beelzebub, don't you do it, and if he makes any fuss, by the Lord, I'll make a grab into his pocket for his tail, take it to the captain, and give him such a wrenching and heaving that his tail will come off short at the stump. Do you see? And then I rather guess when he finds himself docked in that queer fashion, he'll sneak off without the poor satisfaction of feeling his tail between his legs. And what will you do with that tail, Stubb? Do with it? Sell it for an ox-whip when we get home. What else? Now, do you mean to say, and have you been saying all along, Stubb? Mean or not mean, here we are at the ship. The boats were hailed to tow the whale on the larboard side where the fluke chains and other necessaries were already prepared for securing him. Didn't I tell you so, said Flask. Yes, you'll soon see this right whale's head hoisted up opposite the Parmacetes. In good times, Flask's saying proved true. As before, the Pequod steeply leaned over toward the sperm whale's head. Now, by the counterpoise of both heads, she regained her even keel, though sorely strained, you may well believe. So when on one side you hoist in Locke's head, you go over that way, but now on the other side hoist in Kant's, and you come back again, but in very poor plight. Thus some minds forever keep trimming boat. Oh, ye foolish, throw all these thunderheads overboard, and then you'll float light and right. In disposing of the body of the right whale when brought alongside the ship, the same preliminary proceedings commonly take place in the case of a sperm whale. Only in the later instance the head is cut off whole, but in the former the lips and tongue are separately removed and hoisted on deck, with the well-known black bone attached to what is called the crown piece. But nothing like this in present case had been done. The carcasses of both whales dropped astern, and the head-laden ship did not little resemble a mule carrying a pair of overburdening panniers. Meantime, Fedallah was calmly eyeing the right whale's head, and ever and anon glancing from the deep wrinkles there to the lines in his own hand. And Ahab chanced so to stand that the Parsee occupied his shadow, while, if the Parsee's shadow was there at all, it seemed only to blend with and lengthen Ahab's. As the crew toiled on, Laplandish speculations were bandied among them concerning all of these passing things. This is the end of chapter 73. So here we have Stubb and Flask, second and third mates, just gossiping about Fedallah, picking on him because, he's different. They say he's old. Yeah, he's old. He has white hair. They say he's the devil, which, no, probably not. Though this weird magic, put a sperm whale's head on the port side and a right whale's head on the starboard side and the ship will never capsize. That's just hokey, hokum magic, not real stuff. I mean, that's just, okay, we'll make this up and it won't happen, but how often do ships that big typically don't capsize unless you do something really, really stupid? So, I mean, the ship isn't going to capsize. Because, these are expert sailors. They know that you point the ship into the wind when the waves are high, because then it just kind of cuts through and rides over the waves. And, they know that you only turn so tight because you don't want the sails to tip over, and it's a well-designed ship, so it's been floating around for, they said the Pequod was old as 50, 100 years old earlier, so this is an old ship. It's well designed, it's sturdy, it's not going to capsize anyway, and hanging the two whales' heads, one from either side, isn't going to do anything about this. So it was terrible the way Stubb and Flask were picking on Fedallah, but at the same time, they showed some caution, and they said, he's so old, 1 followed by zeros for all the barrels, all the hoops in all the barrels. So you figure each barrel has 3 to 5 hoops, at least, maybe 7, but 3 and 5 are fairly common numbers. So you have 1 in the middle, 1 at the top and the bottom holding the lid in, or 5 to give structure to the middle. The more hoops, the stronger the barrel is, but the more hoops, the more expensive, so you have to, do an engineering thing. And it's like, okay, how many hoops do I need to hold the barrel together? I guess 2 is like the bare bones minimum at the top and the bottom to pinch it. But anyway, so there's a whole bunch of barrels, because the whole idea of the ship is to carry barrels of whale oil. Then you have barrels of water for them to drink, and barrels of food, because barrels were the most common thing to ship stuff in back then, because you take the barrel, you roll it, you do the staggered offset, and they pack fairly well. So, everything was in barrels, and there's all of these barrels, and there's like, oh, Fedallah is one, followed by that. And even older than that, because all the Coopers working all of the time couldn't make enough hoops. So they're saying like Fedallah is infinitely old. But this was before infinite. Now, talked about the sperm whale's head and compared it to Locke and Kant. Now, Locke is a philosopher, and Locke, the philosophy of John Locke, was kind of the basis of the entire American system of government. Locke's idea was that government is based on an agreement. So, two random people out there have no agreement between them. They are in the so-called state of nature. And there's nothing that stops one from killing the other. There's nothing that stops one from robbing the other. There's nothing that stops one from doing whatever. But they get together and they say, I don't kill you, you don't kill me, we're going to be buddies. And so I give up my ability to kill you, and you give up your ability to kill me. And we both get the not being killed. And I say, I'm not going to rob you, and you say, you're not going to rob me, and neither one of us gets robbed. So the whole idea is that, government becomes a trade-off of various different things. So we agree not to kill, we agree not to steal, we agree to honor our contracts, we agree to pay our debts, and at the same time pay a little bit into a government to enforce all of this as sort of a neutral arbitrator. So that was Locke's idea. Locke's idea was that everybody has rights to do everything. You can do anything you want. Murder is fine. Arson is fine. Thievery is fine. Whatever. Go for it. But when we form a society, we give up some of those rights. So, being part of a society, I give up my right to murder. I'm okay with that because I kind of like not getting murdered. So, that was Locke's idea. Now, Kant was dealing a lot with morality. And Kant's idea was, Kant had a couple of big ideas. One of them was something called the Categorical Imperative, which says that nothing can be a rule if everyone wouldn't agree that it should be a rule. So it kind of says, okay, you can't have slavery because the slaves wouldn't agree to be slaves. So if you set up something as kind of a rule, then it has to be something that everybody would agree to as being fair. So that kind of gets into this weird sort of, it pushes things in a more democratic sort of way. But Kant also had a theory that nothing was moral if it was to your own benefit, that the only moral action is something that is against your intent. So, two great philosophers. Kant was, they both might have still been alive right around this time. They were both active in the late 1700s, so they both might have been kicking then. But they were popular philosophers then.
Kant died in 1804.
Lolly says that Kant died in 1804, so that was about 50 years before the book was written and 20 or 30 years before it takes place. John Locke? Lolly's looking up.
1704.
1704? Really?
No, oh, wait, that's Immanuel Kant, sorry. I said John Kant, or Immanuel Kant. John Locke.
So Kant was 1704, so he was way back. He was 150 years before this was written.
John Locke was 1704.
1704. Okay.
So both of them.
So both of them 150 years before this was written. But John Locke was kind of the foundation of the U.S. system of government. And if you ever see the TV series Lost, John Locke is the name of one of the characters.
John Locke, 1704. Immanuel Kant, 1804.
Okay. Immanuel Kant, 1804, so 50 years before. John Locke, 1704, 150 years before. So 100 years before Kant, or before Kant, there was Locke. And anyway, as I was saying, the TV show Lost, John Locke was one of the characters, and another character was named Rousseau, who was another philosopher, French philosopher, who built on the work of Locke and Hobbes, but kind of grabbed the wrong end of the stick. So anyway, this weird sort of, hey, we'll just hang two whales' heads and maybe sink the ship from too much weight, but it'll be balanced. It'll never capsize because we're good sailors. No, it's never going to capsize because we hung the two whales' heads. Never mind that we're good sailors and don't do stupid stuff like overweight the ship with two whales' heads. Yeah, chapter 73.